Good morning and welcome to another edition of Toolbox Tuesday with the SCSA. I'm your host, Kara Bildfell, Safety Advisor out of the Saskatoon office. We have been providing these toolboxes for our members and beyond. These are going to be posted on our YouTube channel as well as we will be sharing them to Facebook. So make sure you like and subscribe to us there. We're also on Twitter and Instagram, so you can follow us there as well. Today we're going to be talking about Site Specific WHMIS Training with the new 2020 OH&S regulations that have been released. There have been some questions that have come in about Site Specific WHMIS Training, what's required for the employees to know. So that's what we're going to be covering today. So first we're going to talk about what WHMIS is. WHMIS stands for Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. This means a system in which to be able to learn about the hazards and proper protection against any chemical or material that a worker may be working with. So WHMIS is new and improved. In 2015, the WHMIS globally harmonized system was released. So requirements for information for WHMIS control products are the same no matter where a product is produced or sold. There are new hazard classifications and pictograms with the globally harmonized or GHS system, and you'll learn all about that with your generic WHMIS training. We do offer that as part of our SCOT training, Safety Construction Orientation Training, and you can take that online through us. What is generic WHMIS? Generic WHMIS teaches you about the labels, the SDSs, the pictograms, etc., that are associated with WHMIS control products. This training will get you started on what you need to know about the hazardous materials in your workplace and how to handle them safely. We can think of this as the ABCs of the training program. It's a good starting point and is required to be taught to all workers in the province, regardless of their profession. Some people may say that, well, I don't work with chemicals, I work in an office setting, but that's not always the case. If you have a printer in your office, the ink that's used in that printer is actually a WHMIS controlled product. You may have cleaning products around the office. Those two are going to be covered under WHMIS. We need to know how to use these products properly, how to store them, dispose of the containers, etc., and that is all covered in generic and site-specific WHMIS training. So what is site-specific WHMIS? Site-specific WHMIS deals with the specific hazards and controls that are associated with the products that you and or your workers are using at the place of employment. This is just a more specific form of WHMIS training, hence the name. So under the new regulations that were released, Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System is covered under Part 22. So 22-1 through 22-15 covers WHMIS products. There are several sections that are covered here, from definitions to training and labels and so on. So what do I need to teach my employees? Worker education and training is covered under Section 22-4 of the new regulations. And we're going to look at each of those subsections in the next few slides. 22-4 subsection 1 says, an employer shall ensure that a worker who works with a hazardous product or may be exposed to a hazardous product in the course of the worker's work activities is informed about A, all hazard information received by the employer from a supplier concerning that hazardous product, and B, any further hazard information that the employer is or ought reasonably to be aware of concerning the use, storage, handling, and disposal of that hazardous product. This goes back to the workers' 3 rights. The right to know. You have the right to know about the hazards in the workplace and how to control them. And it is the employer's responsibility to keep those SDSs up to date, as well as the supplier and workplace labels. 22-4 subsection 2 deals with any control product that may be produced at the place of employment. So subsection 2 states, if a hazardous product is produced in a place of employment, an employer shall ensure that a worker who works with a hazardous product or may be exposed to a hazardous product in the course of the worker's work activities is informed about all hazard information that the employer is or ought reasonably to be aware of concerning the use, storage, handling, and disposal of that hazardous product. That just means if you're making the product yourself, it is your responsibility to make sure that all of those pieces of information are made available to the workers. 22-4 subsection 3 states an employer shall ensure that a worker who works with a hazardous product or may be exposed to a hazardous product in the course of the worker's work activities is educated and trained respecting, and there are 5 subsections here. So A is the content that is required to appear on a supplier label and workplace label for the hazardous product and the purpose and significance of the information contained on those labels. There's a few different pieces of information that we get when we're working with a product. We're going to have the workplace label, the supplier label, and the SDS. Different pieces of information are required on each. You'll learn all about this in your generic WHMIS training. B, the content that is required to appear on a safety data sheet for a hazardous product and the purpose and significance of the information contained on the safety data sheet. So everything that needs to be on the safety data sheet is taught to the workers. C, all necessary procedures for the safe use, storage, handling, and disposal of the hazardous product. So we need to teach the workers how to safely use, store, handle, and dispose of that product. D, all necessary procedures to be followed if fugitive emissions are present where the worker may be exposed to those emissions. So if there are any fumes or anything that are coming off, we need to make sure that we're making the workers aware of those. And then C, all necessary procedures to be followed in case of an emergency involving a hazardous product. We're going to talk about the different sections of the SDS in the slides to come, and that's all going to be covered in the SDS. 22-4 subsection 4 states an employer shall ensure that the education and training required by subsection 3 is developed and implemented for that employer's place of employment and in consultation with the committee if there is an occupational health committee. Make sure that you're utilizing your OHC because they are a really good resource for things that are health and safety related in the workplace. 22-4 subsection 5 states that an employer shall ensure that the education and training required by subsection 3 results in a worker being able to apply the information as needed to protect the health and safety of that worker or any other worker. So we want to make sure that the information that we're giving is relevant. B, the necessary procedures mentioned in clauses 3C through E are implemented and the knowledge of the worker is periodically evaluated using written tests, practical demonstrations, or other suitable means. So you want to make sure that you're in some way, shape, or form testing the employees to make sure that they're retaining the information that you're giving them. 22-4 subsection 6. An employer shall review at least annually or more frequently if required by a change in work conditions or available hazard information, the education and training programs provided to the workers on the safe use, storage, handling, and disposal of hazardous products in consultation with either the committee, the occupational health and safety representative, or if there is no committee or occupational health and safety representative, then a worker representative. So in previous webinars and toolbox talks, we've talked about OHC and occupational health representative. So if you are working in a place of employment that has 10 or more employees, you are required to have an occupational health committee. If you are working in a place of employment with 5 to 9 employees, you are required to have an occupational health representative. And anything under 4, you should have a worker rep as well. So if you are like most people, you may feel overwhelmed after reading regulations, but we're going to break it down. And I know that reading something that is written for lawyers by lawyers is sometimes a little bit daunting. So the SDS, the safety data sheet or SDS, formerly known as the MSDS or material safety data sheet, has all of the information about a product that you need to know. With the new globally harmonized system, all SDSs are now laid out in the exact same format. And we'll go through that. So the sections of the SDS are laid out like this. Section 1 is going to be product identification. So that's going to contain names, the name of the product, any synonyms or other names that it goes by, manufacturers or supplier info, emergency phone numbers, etc. Section 2 is going to be hazard identification. This includes a quick overview of what the product looks like, along with the hazards such as flammability, irritation to skin or eyes, etc. Carcinogenicity also includes the hazard statements such as extremely flammable and the precautionary statements like keep container tightly closed, things like that. And finally, potential health effects, including all routes of entry of the body and what will happen in those cases. Section 3 is information on ingredients. That's pretty self-explanatory. 4 is first aid measures. This will cover for each route of exposure. If swallowed, do this. In case of contact with skin or eyes, do this, and so on. Section 5 is firefighting measures. This will cover which extinguishers to use. It may also say something like do not use water or water jet, etc. Like for a grease fire, you would never pour water on it. So make sure that you're reviewing that with the workers as well. 6 is accidental release measures. This will talk about spills and cleanup, as well as potential environmental impacts. So what happens if it goes into a body of water, things like that. 7 is handling and storage. Again, that's pretty self-explanatory. How do you handle it? How do you store it? It's going to talk about other things that it's allowed to be stored with or not be stored with. 8 is exposure controls and PPE. Again, this is pretty self-explanatory. If there is a piece of PPE that you are required to be wearing when you're handling that product, that's going to be listed in that section. 9 is physical and chemical properties. So appearance, color, odor, pH, flash point, if any, etc. 10 is stability and reactivity. 11 is toxicological information. 12 is ecological information. So how is it going to affect water life, mammals, things like that if it were to have a spill. 13 is disposal considerations. So something like a battery, you wouldn't just throw it into a landfill. That's all going to be listed in section 13 of your SDS. 14 is transport information. So anything that has to do with the transportation of dangerous goods, the UN number is going to be listed there, all that stuff. 15 is regulatory information. So this is under the Toxic Substance Control Act, anything that needs to be listed there. And then 16 is other information, which usually just shows any other information on the supplier, and then any revisions made to the SDS. So that is the end of our toolbox for today. If you still have further questions concerning WHMIS training, site-specific WHMIS training for your workers, you can always call the SCSA, ask for your friendly neighborhood safety advisor, and we would be more than happy to help you. And we'll see you next Tuesday. Thanks for tuning in.